Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. You're listening to our Dungeons and Dragons game. As always, I am your host, the Dungeon Master, or DM for short. And the prologue to this one is in 1871, Alice Little goes through the Looking Glass and has adventures in Wonderland. Her neighbor documents these adventures, but the Xenos discredit them as mere works of fiction. The main plot then takes place at the turn of the century. Dorothy Gale travels to Oz and returns. She's traumatized and won't stop talking about the experience. So that fall, she is taken to a sanatorium by her Aunt Em and Uncle Henry, who think that her obsession with this land of Oz is a sign of mental illness. Once there, Dr. Worley and his assistant, Nurse Wilson, contact Bureau 13. Aramis and Bob show up. They bring Arthur along as a consultant on planar travel. There's a terrible storm, and lightning causes a power outage. There's a flood, and Dorothy is floating away on a chicken coop. So the PCs catch up to her, and they're hanging onto the chicken coop. Together, they're all swept away to the land of Oz, along with Bellina, the talking chicken. When they wash up on the shores of Oz, confused as to exactly what it was that happened that brought them here, they find what is left of the yellow brick road. And the way I ran it was I said each brick was basically gold. It was like a gold block. So they go up the sort of the I don't want to call it a beach because there's no sand. But as they get up on the land, the first thing they found was lunchbox trees. So it was these weird, and the whole thing, I ran it like horror. The trees had these kind of roots that would grow and be the shape of the handle of an old lunchbox, and then the lunchbox itself was made of tin. Um, and so Aramis was really weirded out by that. And Arthur says, one time he went to a planet where the oceans were made of milk and the islands were made of cheese. And Arthur, or excuse me, Aramis is like, "You must be joking." When Arthur says, "No, I'm serious, It's just with immortals and stuff like that, anything goes." And so Arthur's like, "What were the people like? Were there cheese people there?" And he's like, "No, they were were rats." Um, so he's like, "Okay, you're a weird guy." And Arthur's like, "I'm well aware." At any rate, they follow what is left of this destroyed yellow brick road, and they make their way to the Emerald City, and the crystal here has been shattered. Um, Everything's destroyed, and all the people have been turned to stone. And Dorothy gets upset because she sees the Tin Man and the Cowardly Lion have been turned to stone. And before she can really react, they're all attacked by the Wheelers. And the Wheelers are these weird steampunk cyborgs that have wheels where their hand and feet should be. So, of course, it's time to roll initiative. Um, and the Wheelers were not all that. You know what I mean? They were not, you know, super dangerous monsters. But I think they seemed scarier to the players. I said that the wheels didn't have any rubber tires, that the edges of these things were sharp. So the entire wheel is metal, you know, and they were able to then use those blades to, hack and slash at the players. At any rate, TikTok shows up and he is a mechanical man and he helps them in the fight against the Wheelers. And Before you know it, all the Wheelers are dead. And he says that after Dorothy left, the Scarecrow became the King of Oz because he was the smartest. And the Scarecrow told TikTok to wait for Dorothy to return. So that's what he's been doing. And at any rate, from there, they all travel to Princess Mombi's castle, where they think the Scarecrow is. And once there, they meet Mombi, who seems to be incredibly sexy. Um, kind of like what would be a good example there? Various queens from Disney movies, Maleficent, things like that. At any rate, she falls in love with Arthur, and he's pretty okay with that at first. And also, I mean, by virtue of that, she's very inclined to help him in the party, right? Then they find out that her whole deal is she has these wearable heads. And so Arthur's solution to the problem is to use his club where he touches the because it's got two ends. We've talked about this in earlier uh videos. There's the business end of the club, which kills anything he hits with it, right? Then there's the other end of the club, which heals anything, absolutely. And it says in Deities and Demigods, it doesn't matter how big the piece of the person is, it will regrow the entire person. So he uses it on all the heads. Um, so there's suddenly an army of beautiful women, you know what I mean? And at any rate, um, and then Mombi gets back her original head, and Mombi is just sort of wrapped around Arthur's finger, basically. Like she'll do whatever he's into. So also while they're here, the PCs encounter Jack Pumpkinhead, who I mean, he's got a pumpkin for a head, a hollow pumpkin head. And he explains that he was brought to life by Mombi's magic powder, the powder of life. So she gives it to the PCs, and they use it to construct a flying creature, which then flies them across the deadly desert to the Gnome King's mountain. So once they've arrived at the mountain, Dorothy and the Scarecrow are briefly united before the Gnome King turns him into an ornament. And the Gnome King gives each of the group 3 attempts to identify which ornament is the Scarecrow. Bob, Jack, and TikTok all fail and are turned into ornaments themselves. Dorothy, realizing the Gnome King used her ruby slippers to conquer Oz, refuses his offer to send her home. It gets to be Aramis's turn, and he correctly guesses that the Scarecrow has been turned into a green gem. And then he realizes that all of the green objects in the room where you guess are Oz inhabitants. So Aramis is able to restore Jack and Bob, enraging the Gnome King, who imprisons Mombi as punishment for her betrayal. And then he grows to gigantic size. He's colossal, and he is getting ready to eat the PCs. And Bellina the chicken is hiding in Jack's pumpkin head, and she lays an egg, which rolls around in the pumpkin and then drops out into the Gnome King's mouth and fatally poisons him. And when he dies, because he's kind of animating like his entire subterranean kingdom, right, is sort of like an animate objects kind of a situation. That all collapses. Dorothy retrieves the ruby slippers and wishes for the group to return to a restored Emerald City. So they do. Princess Ozma, the rightful ruler of Oz, is freed from the mirror that Mombi had imprisoned her in. Ozma receives the ruby slippers from Dorothy and uses them to send PCs home, promising they can return if they wish using a magic mirror. So the mirror is a doorway between worlds. The other weird thing here is they do the never-ending story thing where everybody in the prime material plane has a counterpart in Oz. And Ozma and Dorothy are counterparts. So I thought that was interesting. At any rate, so the PCs return to Kansas with the magic mirror that is the doorway, right? And they discover that the clinic burned down with everyone except Whirly surviving. Dorothy asks what they're going to do now, and the PCs agree not to send her home because her aunt and uncle thought she should be given electroshock therapy and then lobotomized, right? Um, and the aunt and uncle already think Dorothy died in the fire and are kind of just getting on with their lives. So they just take Dorothy with them, you know. Um, we had a discussion later because Dorothy doesn't show up in any adventures after that. Well, I'll save that for the DM section. So quick epilogue. In 1902, then Aramis and Bob arrest Peter Pan for abducting children, which I thought was funny, and it's true if you think about it. I've also read some articles since then online about, I guess, in the books, uh, Peter Pan is messed up. Like, he went like the Lost Boys aren't really allowed to leave. Even Wendy, he sort of promises, I'm going to take you to Neverland where you don't have, um, annoying things like chores like you have in the real world. But if you think about it, what does she do in Neverland? She's like washing all the dishes and stuff for the Lost Boys. So he lied to her. Lost Boys aren't allowed to leave. And somewhere they mention in the books that that's what the pirates are, I guess, is the pirates are Lost Boys who got away. And then Peter wants to kill him, So like, um, yeah, I'm not so sure Peter Pan is a good guy. So we kind of did it for laughs, but in a way, but yeah, it kind of fits, you know. At any rate, so yeah, I guess we're already in the DM's notes section of the video. Um, we just never do anything with Dorothy again. I liked the idea of like I wanted to see like Dorothy in World War II or something, having adventures and what's adult Dorothy like. I could see her being kind of like an Agent Carter, kind of a character. Um, but yeah, we've never seen it. We've never done anything with her. Um, somebody said something about showing her the ropes in terms of becoming a monster hunter. And at least when she's young, because I think they wanted her to be kind of like Short Round from Indiana Jones, where it's like there's these adventures happening, but then there's just kind of a kid tagging along on the adventures. And I thought that wasn't the way to go because we start off by saying she basically has PTSD from the first visit to Oz, right? Like she's not okay. And that's why um she ends up in the asylum to begin with. So I feel like, I'm not sold on the idea that the second trip to Oz cured all of her problems. You know what I mean? Because you can say, well, she beat the bad guys and therefore she would get over her stuff, but like she beat the bad guy the first time too. Like the Wicked Witch of the West got water thrown on her and she melted. And we still, start this part of the story with her traumatized. So I don't know if the best thing for Dorothy is really to like force her to accompany you while you fight Bigfoot and Mothman. You know what I mean? At any rate, that was this one. I hope that you enjoyed it. If so, be sure to hit like, subscribe, ring the bell, all that jazz, and we'll see you in the next one.